they were not from Canada. They were from India, they were from Russia, they were from, everywhere, and they were all using English, right? Um, so my job as a teacher in that program was to prepare the students to be able to communicate effectively with all of these professors, all of the students who also come from different places, and prepare them for the workforce who, they would probably be working with people from different backgrounds and who speak different languages. And is it okay, for example, if you were just hired in a company and you speak Spanish, and then there is another guy who speaks Spanish close to you? Is it okay for me to
Mhm.
switch and speak in Spanish with this person? Oh, I can't because this is an English speaking environment. Well, who said that, right? Of course you can. You're not disrespecting anybody. Now, those who do feel disrespected, then that's the kind of work that we have to do to, you know, tell them that, hey, they're just having a chat there in Spanish, and that's cool.
Fascinating. It reminds me, this is actually really convenient. I was waiting for my car to be repaired on the weekend. And I told Leo this already. I'm reading Adam Grant's Think Again, that book, and I just finished the chapter on binary bias, which sounds like what you're describing with, something is either good or bad, right or wrong, as opposed to it's a complex topic. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of complexity, and there's common ground to be found. And he actually referenced, uh, I'm going to forget the name of it, but at Columbia in New York, at Columbia University, they have like a difficult discussions lab, according to this chapter, where people can go in and you can be matched with someone who has the complete opposite opinion than you do on a very controversial topic, so gun rights, etc. Um, and they did studies, and they would give them a pre-reading prior to the conversation on gun laws, let's say, and one of them would just have a binary perspective, which same information in both articles, exact same information, but one of them would present the information as guns are good or guns are bad, and the other one would present the information as there's validity to both sides of the argument. And overwhelmingly, I forget the number off the top of my head, but overwhelmingly, the people who came out of their 20-minute discussion saying, we found common ground and we'll sign this document outlining exactly what the common ground is, read the second version of the article prior to
Mhm.
initiating their discussion. So that, are we getting somewhere? That sounds like if we understand culture, language, complexity as there's common ground to be found, is that at least one step in the right direction?
Absolutely, of course. Um, and we see this with anything, right? I think North America now is going through this binary thinking more than ever in anything, in politics, in you name it, right? And we're all going to vote. We're all going to, vote for those people who we believe will represent the country better. But there is common ground in communication values, and there is also opportunities for learning when we don't find the common ground, right? Because I could come to you right now and say, "Oh yeah, I'm completely against guns. I have been like this since forever." Until somebody talks to me and presents, their side of the issue, right? Their arguments, and then we can think about, wow, perhaps in these particular situations. And that's how policies are created. Um, well, they should be created like that, with a lot of discussion and trying to find common ground, to be able to serve the majority of people, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So if we are able to have that kind of thinking, right, with a non-binary thinking with language, um, that's fantastic. Then it's a move towards innovation, creativity, learning, equity, diversity, inclusion, decolonization. truth and reconciliation that we talk so much about in Canada. It's wonderful. And when we have several forces from different disciplines, perhaps, joining efforts and fighting for the same value, um, that's very reassuring.
It also made me think about how information is presented as well, right? Where it's not just people having the conversation, but as I was reading that chapter, I was thinking about like the native speaker, non-native speaker, quote unquote debate, because there is no debate in my opinion, but everyone seems to love to debate this. And that's an example of being of this binary bias, right? Should it be this or should it be
Yeah.
this? And that's to me, that's presenting information not in the right way versus asking, what benefits do I have from this perspective? What benefits, conversely, could I get from this perspective? And I think it sounds like that's what you're describing, and that's presenting information. I think is a really good step in getting in front of this as well.
Absolutely. Presenting information and also doing research, right? Because even even in academia, sometimes we think that we have discovered, okay, now this theoretical framework would be the theoretical framework for everything, or this pedagogy, this method, right? You guys know about, English teaching methods, how many times we have gone through grammar translation was the method, then communicative language teaching is the method. Now, there is a debate between task-based or action-oriented, which one is better? It doesn't have to be one or the other, or can we have this and that, right? Uh, And it could be that, yes, we can. And it could be that, no, perhaps we can have this in these situations or that in these situations. So I'm a huge proponent of plurilingualism, of people being able to use the languages that they have whenever they want to. But I also understand that in certain, even here, for example, we have four people. We are using English because I know that all of you can speak English and we can all understand. And also for our listeners. So there are, you know, spaces where you're going to be sticking to one language, but that doesn't mean you are devaluing all the other languages. But there are other times, the other day I was sharing a live that I have done in Portuguese. So that is also something that I do. Otherwise, we're going to be sticking to one language only, and even, not do any kind of work in the languages that you already have because they're not as valued in society. They don't have the social capital, or, oh, I'm not going to make money with this language, so I might as well never use this language anymore. It's not about money. Of course, English is, one of the most lucrative languages that you can use nowadays. But that doesn't mean you cannot monetize with other languages, or you cannot express. And I'm talking about money because a lot of people think about money, but it's not about money only. It's about identity. If you do not express who you are, you can have other kinds of problems. You can have some mental health issues that we don't even know that it's because you are trying to be someone else that you are not, right? Or trying to speak in a language that, sure, I want to speak this language, but I am suppressing who I am so that I can try to become someone else. And that's a huge mistake.
I think
It's go ahead, Mike.
no, sorry, and sorry. I apologize for being late, Angelica. It's great to meet you again. Actually, we met at
No
ACLA
worries.
last year, and in New York. It's great to see you again. No,
Yeah.
but just as
Good
listening
to
to
see
you
you,
speak,
Mike.
it's like we on the West Coast here we talk a lot about having a sense of place. And you're right, it's not always about money. It's just about knowing who you are and feeling like you belong, right, in a community. And as I was reading through some of your more recent work on plurilingualism, I just thought, yeah, like the competency. As I was reading, I was like, it sounds like it's about really helping learners kind of tap into these different resources they have, both like with the languages they speak and the knowledge they have about different cultures, and maybe helping them find ways in which they can leverage that knowledge in different situations, right? Like to show that they belong, or to kind of boost their confidence. so to speak. So I just think it's wonderful, and I liked how you tried to kind
Absolutely.
of capture that in in a measurement, right? In a tool. I do have a question though, because I love that you just brought up identity, and I apologize as if this has already been discussed, but I think it's kind of still consistent with the flow of conversation here. Um, we always like to kind of talk about the practical nature of some of these instruments and ideas. And one that I really liked, one practical activity that I saw in your research that ties into this idea of identity and helping students become aware of all these resources they have, and teachers as well, is this idea of language portraits. And I don't know if you're still familiar with that, but could you just unpack that a little bit for for our listeners? Because I think it's just such a beautiful exercise, and that I think a lot of teachers would benefit from having in their classrooms. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so language portraits, they originally emerged as, let's say, a piece of paper with a silhouette of a body, like a little doll like this. And it was given to the students, and they were asked to, you know, locate the languages that they have in their repertoire. We call this a repertoire, right? Languages or cultures on this body, um, and then try to get them to think about what these languages represent and why they were located in these parts of the body. So I can give you an example of so many portraits that I've seen over time, but a lot of people like to draw a heart on their bodies, and they put their first language there, or a language that they haven't spoken, or a heritage language, or a language that represents their community, their ethnic community, even if they don't speak, because there is this emotional connection. Um, and nowadays, I don't like to use the silhouette anymore. I like to just tell students, here's a piece of paper, it's blank. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to draw yourself however you want. It could be, um, a piece of art or a different type of representation. Doesn't have to be your body. And I would like you to include all of the languages that you have in your repertoire, the cultures too, but I give them some more prompts. I provide them with, oh, there you go. I provide them with, prompts. For example, think about where you come from. Think about whether the country where you come from has been colonized or not, or not. What are the languages that you studied at school? Why is it that you are studying English now? What are the motivations behind it? Uh, what type of engagement with language do you have online when you're, playing games with other people online? So that there are several prompts that really get them to think about their entire repertoire. And still, it's very difficult to capture 100% of your repertoire because it's always evolving, right? And sometimes you remember things, sometimes you don't. So, for example, if my mom had to draw herself right now, I'm pretty sure that she would include Korean there, even though she doesn't speak Korean. She has never been to Korea, but she loves Korean drama. She she watches that on Netflix all the time. So, of course, Korean would be part of it. Japanese would be part of it because she loves sushi and she has great respect for Japanese culture. So all of these little, we may think they are little, right? An appreciation of a culture here. I like this kind of sport that is related to that language, or engage online with people playing games in one particular language. All of these little interactions, they make up your linguistic and cultural repertoire. And it's a great way to have that represented in a drawing. And this drawing is very particular and very private to that particular person. Everybody has one unique, portrait that represents your identity. And you were talking about sense of belonging. When we talk about sense of belonging, it doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to feel a sense of belonging where you are physically, right? So we were talking about international students, for example, or immigrants going to another country. Does not necessarily have to be in my neighborhood. It doesn't have to be in the city where I am now. It could be that you will never really be accepted by the people in that neighborhood. And that's okay, but you are accepted elsewhere. So where is it that you are accepted? And take that as, part of you building strength and strengthening your identity too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
During COVID, right? During COVID, we weren't even going out. So who cares about my neighbor if they don't like me? There are so many other people who do. Um, so identity can be across space, across time, across communities, different types, online, offline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important for us to think about that too, and tell students and other people who are struggling with being accepted.
Oh, absolutely. And I certainly didn't want to limit it to geography, but I think that it's great that we make that. Yeah, I think
Oh,
we
for
need to make
sure.
that
Yeah.
distinction for the audience as well, because we can as you suggest, we can sometimes have these very kind of narrow definitions of of community, right? But no, we, as you point out, we live in many communities in all sorts of spaces, both virtual and physical, right? So yeah, no, it's awesome and so additive too, right? Because if you can take all these different understandings and resources and use them to your advantage in to kind of, to join these communities or to exercise your own agency to leave your mark. I think that ties into this other idea. Like, um, was it Matsutoshi Sato we had on the podcast who talked about L2 self, right? And I know that he's kind of played with that concept and he's not wedded to it in many ways, but this idea of thinking about who you want to be in the language, right? And finding your own direction. And I think this kind of PPC really kind of speaks to that when as I interpret it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about your other self in a language that you are learning is something that can be very helpful. An imagined identity, right? What is it? What is the identity that you imagine that you are going to be? I do that a lot with French now because I'm learning French. So I go like, what do I want to sound
Sure.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or be like? I still want to be myself, but then you also have to kind of like get used to yourself, hearing yourself in that
Yeah.
language, right?
I'm sure I sound like the
Yes.
shogun
Which is
when I
also
speak Japanese. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm aiming high, Angelica, aiming high with my Japanese. Yeah, yeah. Shogun or bust. Yeah,
bring it down, bring it down.
The lab is called the Difficult Conversations Lab by Professor Peter Coleman in Columbia University. And the description is the Difficult Conversation Lab is an initiative to study polarizing moral conflicts and to see whether and how dialogue can succeed as a tool for reducing and how dialogue can succeed as a politicized issue. A little bit on that. So maybe I'm glad we're having these difficult conversations about language, cultural identity, plurilingualism, linguistic discrimination.